Hello everyone and welcome to the video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you all how to add pathfinding to your game in GDevelop. Now, before we begin the video, there's a few things that I want you all to check out. First of all, there's one link in the description that is a full 2+ hour 3D platformer course in GDevelop. It's the most popular GDevelop tutorial that's on YouTube right now, especially in 3D. Once again, it's 2+ hours of a full 3D platformer course for completely free. And also, I'd like to invite you all to join the Q crew using the link in the description. And that's simply an email group that I have, and it will give you the latest videos for Q the game dev. Also, free game development coaching for any problem that you have in GDevelop, and general game development advice and problems, and also game development tips that I post every week. Now, with that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Now, pathfinding in GDevelop. Pathfinding is when you program an object to follow another object, but also you can program the object to specifically avoid other obstacles in its path. So this is basically an advanced way to make follow AI that has special conditions. So what do I mean by this? Now, we're going to open up a blank GDevelop project to start off. And when you're dealing with pathfinding, you have two things. I'm going to go back to the whiteboard real quick. We have the object itself, and this is going to be, I'm going to put M for the mover. This is the object that moves towards a position. And then you also have a goal object. I'm going to represent that by using G. So the mover object, it will move towards the goal. This is the whole objective of pathfinding, and it will choose the most optimal and fastest path to get there. And there are also going to be obstacles that you can set in its way. I'm going to represent that with O. Obstacles that mover will avoid, and it will move towards the goal. So this is how pathfinding works. Now, how do we actually make a pathfinding regular loop in GDevelop? So let's add an object first. Remember, the first object we need is the mover object. What object do we want to move towards the goal? So when we're making pathfinding, this of course is 2D pathfinding. So we're going to make a sprite object. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a sprite, but you know what I mean. Most of the time we use sprites. And I'm going to call this the mover object. And we're going to create a sprite with Piscal. I'm going to simply just make a regular black sprite, and we're going to save it. I'm going to hit apply and drag this onto the scene. Now, right now, this is just a cube that doesn't move at all. So now I'm going to double click, and we're going to go into behaviors and add a behavior. Now, when it comes to GDevelop, pathfinding is one of the default behaviors that's up here. You don't need an external extension for this. So we're going to go ahead and click into pathfinding. And we're going to cover this later, a little bit later. But for now, these are just the options for your pathfinding object, like how fast it moves towards the object or the goal. Now, before we even do any of this, we're going to go ahead and hit apply. And we're going to add another object, and that object is going to be the goal. Now, when it comes to the goal object, this is also going to be another sprite, and we're going to rename this to goal. Going to create with Piscal. We're going to resize it, and then we're going to just color it completely. We're going to hit save, and the goal object, it doesn't have to necessarily have a behavior attached to itself, but one behavior that I will attach to it is the top-down movement, just so we can see how pathfinding works in a live format. Because pathfinding, it doesn't have to be on only a still object. The goal itself can move, and the pathfinding will always update, and the mover will always move towards the goal. So I'm going to give this the top-down movement behavior, and we're going to just, we can keep everything the same except for like snappy acceleration and deceleration. So we're going to set this both to 10,000, and we're not going to rotate it. So let's go ahead and hit apply. And we're going to drag the goal onto the scene, and we're going to hit preview. Now, of course, nothing's going to happen at all, because in order for us to actually activate pathfinding, we have to use a behavior, not behavior, we have to use an event in order to move this mover towards the goal. So we're going to go ahead and exit out. We're going to go into our events and add a new event. Now, we always want this to move towards the goal, so we don't need a condition, but let's go ahead and add an action. Now, in order to make the mover move towards the goal, just click into the mover, and then when we go into our pathfinding, we can just scroll down until we have move towards a certain position. So I'm going to type in move and we have move to a position. And we have the destination X position and the destination Y position. And as you can already tell, we want to move towards the goal. So what we're going to do is put goal.x, or you could put center X to move towards the center, but for the sake of simplicity, we're going to use just .x. And then we have goal.y. So we're moving towards the X and Y position of the goal. So we're going to hit OK, and we're going to preview. And as you can see, right now we have some basic pathfinding already working, and it's moving towards the player. And another thing is we can actually run away from it, and it will always follow us forever. It will constantly update because we made it so it constantly updates. And you can also set this based off of a trigger. For example, you can have something like a chasing dog that it doesn't start chasing the player until you click a certain button or until something's activated that angers it or something. So that is an example of something that you could realistically use for pathfinding. Now let's go ahead and go into the mover, and let's go into the behaviors. Now I'm going to explain every single behavior that we have, every single parameter that we have in this pathfinding behavior. Now let's start with the easy ones. The easy ones are acceleration and the max speed, as well as the angle offset. Acceleration, you should probably know what acceleration is, but this is how fast it will move to its top speed. For example, if we set the max speed to 300, let's not 400, but 300, the acceleration, the higher we have the acceleration, the faster it will hit max speed. And the acceleration is really high, it will essentially hit its max speed instantly. So that's how acceleration works. And of course, max speed is self-explanatory. That's the maximum amount of speed it can move. Angle offset is not too useful unless you have a sprite that by default is not turned correctly. If it's like facing upwards by default, you may want to set like a 90-degree angle offset. We also have the rotation speed, because if we preview the project again, you'll see that it will start rotating towards the player when we move, and it's kind of smooth. It's fast enough where it's practically instant, but it's not actually instant. If you set the rotation speed to something really high, it will practically snap towards it. And then we also have a checkbox, and this checkbox for rotate object, this just shows whether or not our player or mover will rotate. It doesn't actually affect the pathfinding at all. You'll still move towards the goal, but you just won't rotate like you're looking towards it. And now we have some extra things. Now we have the virtual cell width and the cell height. Now, this is for how precise you want the movement to be, but it will be more costly if you have it more precise. Now, what do I mean by this? The cell width, the virtual cell width, and the cell height. If we set this to a higher value like 200, it will move in a very, it will not move as precisely, because the grid is a little virtual grid in terms of pixels will be, it will be spaced out in 200 on the width or 200 on the height, depending on which one we set it to, and it won't move as smoothly. It'll have less options to move because it's basically moving itself on an invisible grid. But if we set this to something low like 1, it will almost have no grid at all. The grid will be very small, so it will have more potential ways to move, but it'll be more costly on the computer to compute that most optimal path. So it's good to set it as something that's low, but not too low, but also not too high. So a value like 20, like we just saw, works perfectly fine without affecting the performance a bunch. And then we have the X offset and the Y offset for the grid. This is not too useful, but it's just for if you're making a level and for some reason it doesn't align with 0, 0, like your level may start off somewhere in between the grid, you can set an offset based off of that. But for my personal testing, it almost doesn't matter at all. The pathfinding is pretty smart, so the Y and X offset isn't too important. Now, getting into the extra border size, this will set a border around the goal. It can only get so close to the goal. So if I set this to something like 50 and hit apply, right now if I preview it, it will go all the way towards the goal. But that's the reason why it goes all the way towards the goal, is because we haven't set the goal as a pathfinding obstacle. So it doesn't work for the goal itself. It works for obstacles. And what do I mean by this? What do I mean by this? It can only get so close to obstacles. So we're going to add our first obstacle. So I'm going to add, and we're going to click into another sprite. I'm just going to call this obby to represent like an obstacle or something. And we're going to create with Piscal once again. Gonna make a red sprite. I'm going to paint it. And we're going to hit apply. Well, before we hit apply, let's go ahead and add behavior. And I'm going to put pathfinding. And then we're going to put obstacle for pathfinding. Now, this will become an impassable object. And when you set it as an impassable object, that means it will not be able to go through it. It will have to avoid it. If we don't check this on, it will not have to avoid it. It will just simply go through it if it has to. But if we set it as impassable, it will do whatever it takes to never touch it. It will never touch this object. So now when we have an obby, what I'm going to do is trap everything around. Well, I'm going to trap the goal so there's no way that the mover can get to it. So just bear with me as I trap it. And then we're going to duplicate this one more time. And now we have it completely trapped. Now if we preview, it's not even going to try to move at all. It's not going to try to move. But if I don't trap it, let's preview it again. As you can see, it went all the way to it and avoided it. Now, when it comes to the border size, if I set the border as 0, let's see what happens when we set the border to 0. It'll move towards it. And as you can see, the difference between when the border was 0 and when the border was 50, it got extremely close, literally to the point of actually touching it. It got extremely close to it because it had no invisible border. So it had no invisible shield around it where it can say like it'll stop itself from moving towards it. And this is mainly good for when we don't want collisions. For example, 0 is too small for this cube because 0 is such a small value that it can make the game look low quality and low budget because we literally just went through a border or an object that we weren't supposed to pass because the pathfinding is using its own calculations. So when we want to set the border to make it so it doesn't actually touch these obstacles. So if I set the extra border to 100, it's going to keep itself farther away from the actual obstacles. So that's the whole point of using a border size. Now, last but not least, when it comes to the pathfinding behavior, we explained basically everything. So we're going to go back to the behaviors. One more thing I didn't explain is that you have allowed diagonals. You should basically always have this set unless you're looking for a specific type of movement. Because if you don't allow diagonals, it's going to move in a very choppy way. It will move straight first, and then it's going to move up, and then it goes around like that. And that may be useful depending on what game you're trying to make. Maybe if it's a more retro game, but modern games you would normally want to allow diagonals. And smoothing max cell gap, or for short just smoothing, this will change how smoothly it moves towards it. And what do I mean by smoothly? The pathfinding behavior normally holds itself back because when you move with a like diagonally, it's actually not optimal most of the time. It will avoid certain paths, like the fastest path, in favor for a path that looks smoother. For example, if I set the smoothing gap to 0 compared to 1, you're going to see how choppy this movement looks compared. Like, the movement just didn't seem as smooth. Now, it wasn't too bad, but let's set the movement with a smoothing gap as 2 instead of 0. And if we preview it now, you see that it more smoothly created its path. So smoothing gap is not the craziest thing in the world to change it, but once again, from my own experience, best at 1, but you can do your own experimentations. If you're trying to absolutely make sure that moves towards the goal in the fastest way possible, you would definitely want to set this to 0. It will use the best possible path. And you could also set the cell width and the cell height as something lower, so it could also use the fastest possible path. Now, one more concept that we need to cover is object priority. And object priority is what happens when you have two objects that are both not impassable, but which object should it avoid over other ones. And this can be important, for example, if you want to have a game where it will pass through like some spikes, but the enemy will choose the path through the spikes that do the least damage. This is basically how you set intelligence and add extra smarts to your pathfinding. Now, when you have one object, if we have this pathfinding obstacle right here, and we go into the behaviors, we have the cost, and then we have whether or not it's impassable. Now, when you're dealing with costs, you don't want to set this as impassable, but the cost, the higher it is, the more it will try to avoid it. So I'm going to show you an example of how this is used. We're going to have obby1, which is this, as 5, which means this will be highly likely to be avoided. And we're going to duplicate this obstacle. And this is going to be obby2. We're going to go into the behaviors and we're going to set this cost as 2, which is lower. And since this has a lower cost, obby2 will be favored over obby1 because in this mover site, or I like to call it the player, but it's not really the player, for this obstacle right here that's trying to move towards the goal, it will value avoiding obstacle 1 more than it will value avoiding obstacle 2 because it has less of a cost. It's like going into a store. You're trying to get the same product. You're going to buy the product for the least cost you can get if it's exactly the same. And since the goal is the same, it's going to get it for the least cost. So let me show you an example of this. If we trap or surround obby or the goal, if we surround the goal with these obby fences, I'm going to duplicate it. But at the bottom, we set obby2. We can already predict the behavior using the cost because we already know that obby2 has the lowest cost. And since it has the lowest cost, it's going to avoid obby1. It's not going to go from the side, it's not going to go from the right, and it's not going to come from the top. It's going to go through the bottom in order to get to the goal. So let's see this in action. If we go ahead and preview, you see it avoids obby1, and it kind of looks like it touched it. That's because the border size being 0. But it avoids obby1, and it goes through obby2 to get to the goal. And that is how you use pathfinding in GDevelop. Once again, this is used for AI mainly. So for smart AI. And you can be very creative. Once again, you can trigger certain things on and off. And just for some tips, remember, if you want to make pathfinding more dynamic, the main things you will want to change on the fly is this behavior or these behavior parameters. And these behavior parameters can be changed using events. You can also move towards different goals. You can switch goals if you would like to for smarter pathfinding. You're going to have to be creative. And if you have any questions about any ideas you have for pathfinding, can it be used for this scenario? Can it be used for this scenario? You can ask them in the comments, but also Q crew members, you'll definitely get priority. I check that my email all the time and I coach people with plenty of problems. I've already helped a bunch of developers. But once again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. And before we end the video, if you haven't already, make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on any new videos. The next video that we're having is cutscenes in GDevelop, and then after that, we're going to have dynamic, flexible mobile UI, and flexible UI in general, but specifically targeted towards mobile use because you need to have flexibility on different device screen sizes. But the next tutorial will be cutscenes in GDevelop. Now, once again, if you like the video, make sure to subscribe, but I'll catch you in the next tutorial. See ya.